Your kitty cat says someone is trying to call you. Kitty says hurry up and answer.
Well, you know how that is from the last couple of shows.
By not answering.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to do the thing for you again. Well, I always give you a shout out, even though I know for a fact that, let's face it, Progressive Soup has been on the air 8 years, and Basil Buddha Cat presents, hold on, exclamation point, it's been on the air for 5 years, but you're still claiming that you got me my gig. Now, we know that's not the case, but I did promise you, so I will. Basil's on the phone. And by the way, Basil, on his 2 shows last week, predicted that the Yukon women would lose. He predicted it. You have to watch. You don't believe it. He predicted that they would. He's been predicting all season. And eventually, obviously, great team, incredible coach, but there's no way in the world they should have got as far as they did because they graduated the 3 top draft picks in the women's professional draft. Yeah, am I getting it right? And so Basil was complaining. He's grousing on the show about the last 8 teams, the final 4 for the men and the final 4 for the women, and about how the out of those 8 teams, you had 4 birds, 3 dogs, and lung cancer. North Carolina Tar Heels. So every time we put up on the air, on the graphic on the screen, every time I asked him about one of those 8 teams, because what happened was there were 3 really good teams in the NCAA tournaments. At least in the men's tournament, had 3 great teams. You had the Kentucky Wildcats, gone. You had the Villanova Wildcats, gone. And the Arizona Wildcats, sorry. So we ended up with the final 8. We got 4 birds, 3 dogs, and lung cancer. And Basil predicted that 1 dog would beat the other dog, which would be, of course, the Mississippi State Bulldogs beating the Yukon Huskies. But so there, you happy? He said one more thing. Said want me to throw that quarter and put a shout out to a little public service announcement. You want that too, right? Okay. So this is almost as important as his predictions. But the Borrow It program at local public libraries in Connecticut are being defunded in the new state budget. Now, what does the Borrow program do? Well, if you live in Bethel, for instance, and you go to the Bethel Library and they don't have a book, they scout it out somewhere else, and you can either go to that other library and pick it up, or they'll ship it, library rate, which is practically $0, to Bethel, and I would get that book from whatever public library in Connecticut happens to have it. Not anymore. You cannot even go to another library and pick it up yourself, because the only place where you can get library books under the new underfunded or unfunded Borrow It program, the only way you can get a book at the Bethel Library or Danbury or wherever you happen to live, the only way you can get a book there is if you have a library card for that library. Every town has to be completely self-sufficient. So obviously, certainly more, some towns are going to have a lot better library programs than others, and that goes right back to the notion of unfairness and inequality in our educational system and the library system, and don't even get me started. Okay. Yeah, Katie's off. He had to say. Okay, welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. With me I have Henrry Pietras, who just came back from an incredible trip to many of the countries in Europe, principally to Dresden in what used to be East Germany, but is now part of Germany. And Henry's going to talk about what he saw and what impressed him, anything that might not have impressed him, and just an amazing tour of, how many countries in Europe did you go to?
Just 3.
Just 3, okay. Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Germany?
And Poland.
And Poland, so, 4 countries.
3. Czech Republic,
yeah, but
Germany,
but they're different countries,
and Poland. No, Czechoslovakia split into 2 countries.
Right, so that's 2 different countries.
Yeah, but I didn't go to the other.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So you just went to the Czech. You didn't go to Slovakia. You just went to the Czech Republic.
Correct.
Okay, so 3 countries. Without further ado, Henrry Pietras, who's acted as co-host on many an occasion and knows his stuff, and he's been to Europe now, so he can tell us about it. Go ahead.
Well, the trip actually started being a trip about visiting a friend's place of birth called Dresden. He and his family, well, his family owned quite a bit of Dresden. They were bankers, so they had a lot of influence over what was happening in Dresden before World War II. And as a consequence, they did get out of Germany before the war started. They were Jewish. And Henry ended up being actually going on vacation in Norway when the war started, and then he was a prisoner of war in Norway because Norway was neutral, and then somehow he got out. Ended up getting out through England out to America. He enrolled in college and then ended up getting drafted. And his job here in this country was to interview the German prisoners of war who were here in all 50 states. There were prisoner of war camps in all 50 states, and his job was to interview them to determine who could go back to Germany and run the country. And you know, that's an extremely far-sighted vision in my view, in that you were vetting people for, you know, and preparing for, you know, what would happen and what would the U.S. do once the war ended.
That's a pretty smart move on the presumption that we would ultimately win the war, because if we didn't win the war, there were horrible consequences. So you had to kind of look forward and say, well, crossing our fingers, we're going to win the war. Let's look at these people that we have captured, and like you say, find out who are good qualified people to go back and retake their country.
Yeah. Now that is remarkable, considering that, you know, we like to think that we learn lessons from history. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, you know, it's an admirable lesson to learn from what Henry did here in this country. Right during World War II. Unfortunately, when we went into Iraq, the Nazis were the Baathists in Iraq. Mm-hmm. And what happened to them first thing when we took over Iraq?
They all got kicked out of every position in government and out of the army, and became ultimately the insurgency. Yep.
And now they're part of ISIS. Many of them are part of ISIS because they were not included. Or they were not, some of them perfectly qualified to run government were kicked out.
Quick shout out to Michael Zakea, Michael J. Zakea, USMC, United States Marine Corps, retired, who's got a new book coming out that we're going to go to the Brookfield Library later this week and hear about. Thursday of this week. Okay, it'll be Thursday night. So
7 p.m.
Thursday, 7 p.m. at the Brookfield Public Library, Thursday, 7 p.m. Michael J. Zakea, United States Marine Corps, retired, who had trained the Iraqi army that was left after the Baathists were all thrown out. And that didn't work out too well for a bunch of years. But apparently now they're starting to make at least some headway in kicking out, I don't care whether you call it ISIL or ISIS or who's this or what's this, it's all the same. They're trying to clear Mosul out and retake that section of Iraq. And hopefully, eventually, one day there'll be a peaceful resolution to a 5-minute war that turned into 14 years now? Seems like about 100 years, but...
It's an ongoing involvement, I guess.
Yeah, the longest war in the United States history that Donald Rumsfeld predicted would be rose petals at the feet and bada bing, bada boom, 5 minutes and the war is over and everything is great and they're giving us all their oil and stuff and continue.
So Michael, in our conversation with Michael, he confirmed that that actually happened. So it's not my assessment that the Baathists were thrown out and disregarded, but Michael as well confirmed that that's what happened as well. So it's not just my view, but his. I'm just bringing up the idea that in World War II there were people who were actually thinking ahead. Yeah. Whereas
doing the right
during
thing,
Iraq,
doing what we should have done in Iraq.
During Iraq, we didn't do that. But getting back to our visit in Dresden, Dresden was, during World War II, was totally destroyed. And it was destroyed, I don't know, because of spite or whatever, but it was pretty much razed to the ground. There wasn't a lot of buildings left.
Yeah.
And then once the East Germans, because Dresden is in East Germany, once the East Germans took over, they did renovate some buildings, but in the case of the palaces and the museums and so on, they were pretty much untouched till 1989 when the wall, when Germany, East Germany, well, West Germany merged with East Germany, and then they started renovating. But if you went to Dresden now, you would have a hard time finding any ruins or any vestige of ruins since 1989, because most of it has been restored.
That's pretty amazing. And a quick reference point, if you want to know about Dresden in World War II, Kurt Vonnegut's marvelous novel Slaughterhouse 5, which is based on Dresden and the basically carpet bombing of Dresden with incendiary devices that pretty much incinerated the entire city.
Yeah.
And only by dint of luck, Kurt Vonnegut and the rest of the Americans who were working there in the slaughterhouses and the packing houses to prepare munitions, food for German soldiers, they got taken underground because I guess they were an important commodity to the Germans as far as their war effort. So they got shuttled underground, and only by dint of that they survived, and the rest of the entire city, everybody was basically incinerated. Pretty much every citizen of Dresden that was above ground were.
Yeah, I have a friend who died just recently who survived. He was 14 years old when Dresden was being bombed with napalm. And napalm is serious stuff, because if you get on your skin, you can't get it out. Yeah. You can't get it off. So it just sticks to you, and effectively you get burned up. But he and his father was a chemist. He said that during the bombing, he and his father were on the roof of their house trying to put out anything they may get on it. So getting back to Henrry, Henrry, because of their banking background, they had some investments outside of Germany at the time. So he ended up having an investment firm here in New York City. Interestingly, George Soros was a fund manager for him for 11 years. He worked for Henrry. Had George Soros working for him for 11 years before he went on his own.
George Soros, by the way, is he's the Karl Rove of the right wing. The way we talk about
the left wing.
Right, with the way we talk about the Koch brothers, the other guys, the right wing, talk about George Soros as being Mr. Bad Guy and Mr. If you hate that guy, send us money. The way we use Karl Rove and the Koch brothers and the other guys is well, if you hate those guys, oh, by the way, send money.
So our friend does have, there were about 10 people from this area that went, people that played tennis with Henrry for years. So this was he gave us an opportunity to visit his old digs and see how it got restored and reconstructed. One of the places that got reconstructed was this cathedral. There was, I forget the name of it, but it's right in the main part of town. It's Episcopalian, not Catholic, but Henrry and this gentleman by the name of Gunther Bobel, a Nobel laureate in chemistry, have donated, actually Mr. Bobel donated his entire Nobel Prize or Nobel award. It's not a a win, it's an award. And in order to restore it.
That's a lot of money, isn't it?
And Henrry also donated quite a bit of money to get it restored, along with a whole bunch of other people.
The Nobel Prize has a lot of money attached to it.
It's about, I would guess, about $1 million, and then you can split it 3 ways. But you cannot be dead when you receive.
You have to be still alive.
You have to be alive when you're awarded it. But Mr. Bobel has been instrumental in getting it. and getting it done. So we actually ended up getting a tour. Okay, but now think about all these tours. Now Henrry is very much interested in art. There's 14 museums there, okay, in Dresden, okay, and most of these are royal castles converted into museums. So the royal castle, we stayed at a hotel called the Kempinski. It's got a very fancy name, you know, it starts with a 2 and about 50 letters after it, and it starts with a T. I just forget it, but it's the it's part of the Kempinski chain of hotels worldwide. And right across the street is the Royal Castle, the Summer Castle, and there's like 4 different museums there. And every museum we visited, we had a tour by either the director of the museum or the curator in charge of that collection. Okay? On day 1, we meet with the director of all of the 14 museums. We had lunch with her. And then and when we toured the cathedral that was restored, it was by the pastor, okay, and the architect who spent 20 years restoring the building.
Wow.
So it was an awesome experience. You know, it's beyond. I mean, the experience was beyond, you know, anything that you could put a monetary value on. It was just an unbelievable way of accessing a lot of this stuff, and you know, we could, you know, we were like royal guests, and we felt like royal guests because of our friend Henrry.
And now, how much of the city has been restored, and how much is left to restore?
As far as I know, just about everything is restored. He took us where he lived, and that area has been destroyed, and new houses have been put up. And right next door, his family was putting up a public pool that is going to be commissioned this year. And right next door to that was a Volkswagen factory that was being redone in order to support the new Golf electric cars coming online. So
nice.
You know, I guess we could have gotten a tour. We had limits on time, of course, but we could have gotten a tour of that factory as well if we wanted it. And then one day we went outside of town. We took a tour of what it looked like outside, you know, on the periphery. But then one afternoon we went to a hunting lodge that was used by King Augustus II and III. He was also king of Poland.
Ah, okay. So it was a larger empire at that point.
Yeah, and so it's, you know, a hunting lodge. Okay. All right, like maybe like 20 rooms. You know, these rooms are as big. Each room is as big, at least as big as this, with like, you know, a 20-foot ceiling and you know, all kinds of hunting trophies. And
this being about the size of a small restaurant with enough tables to well, we've got folks sitting here eating, and but apparently some of them seem to enjoy the show because they've stopped their conversations, and some of them even put their forks down and are listening in. So you folks at home certainly. Yeah.
So our friend at the hunting lodge, you know, we got access to, you know, normally that place is closed, but you know, the curator of, actually the director of that hunting lodge was there to walk us through and show us all the rooms, and it was just magical.
So Germany is a big country with coal. Yeah. Huge coal reserves, incredible coal reserves, probably on a par with the United States. What's going on with coal in Germany?
Well, it's phasing out. Actually, a couple of years ago, I met a gentleman in New York City, quite young, maybe in his 20s. He just got married, and he says, "I'm a coal miner in Germany, and you know, in 2 years, I'm being let go because my coal mine is closing." And he was running machinery, you know, like the digging machinery. He was operating machinery like that, and he was being phased out.
No pick and axe, huh?
Yeah.
No pick and axe?
No. It's all mechanized.
Well, that's kind of that way in the United States.
But he was quite proud of it. But what you see in Germany, I ended up actually landing in Dusseldorf because my mother went to visit family. And I went from Dusseldorf, which is near the French border, like middle of Germany, on the French side. I ended up going through Dortmund, where my family lived, because I made a stupid mistake. I had 2 passports, and I gave one to my mother, happened to be mine. So I had to go back and get it.
Jeez.
Otherwise, you know, I would have, you know, traveled without a passport, which would have not been a good thing, you know, now looking back.
Yeah, yeah.
But I went back, and the next morning I went from Dortmund, which is only like 60 miles away, through Berlin to Prague, and that was an 8-mile ride. In some cases, I mean, I love train rides, so it was no big deal for me. The trains were awesome in terms of quietness, in terms of space, and in terms of, you know, lack of rattling, because, you know, when you were running 120 miles an hour, these things were nice and stable. I mean,
120 miles an hour.
Yeah, 200 kilometers.
I don't think that the trains that travel from Danbury through Norwalk down to Manhattan go more than about 40 or 50 miles an hour.
Well, they'll hit from. I used to commute from Danbury to New York City for 4 years, so. The best we could do is probably around 70 miles an hour, and that's usually outside of Stanford towards New York City. Okay, but even there, the trains were suspect because they went like this, and a couple of times we lost the catenary, which is the thing that feeds the electric power to the trains.
Yeah.
Of course, since we were going in diesel, we could get by, but electric trains were dead in the water.
120 miles an hour.
And in Poland later on, and in the Czech Republic, we hit about 100 miles an hour.
Nice.
Now every train is, you know, there are 2. Well, the ones in Germany were double deckers. So
really, double decker, like 2, one upstairs and a downstairs on the train.
Yep. Yep. And it was nice because I went on the upper deck, and in the middle of the car, you have space for luggage. So you can, like, you know, put luggage, instead of putting passenger seats there, they have space for big luggage, which was nice. And then in every car you had, every car, including Poland as well as the Czech Republic, the trains from Germany went right into Prague.
Yeah.
So those trains have monitors, so they give you all kinds of data, like, you know, how fast are you going, what the next station is, you know, what the route is, you know, whatever information you needed was on those monitors.
Now, if you're going to go 120 miles an hour in a train, it seems like short hops on a jet would be pretty much precluded, because jets go obviously a lot faster than 120.
Yeah.
But if you're only traveling a couple hundred miles, what's the point in flying 120 miles and having to go through baggage check-in, baggage check-out, and all the other stuff?
Yeah.
When you can just go to the train, toss your stuff on the train. I'm sure it's a much simpler process than taking a jet.
You would think, you know, the trains are quite romantic, but they were not that busy, number one. The only busy train was one from Dusseldorf to Dortmund, and there was it looked like there were a lot of immigrants, and it was so packed that I actually had to stand with my luggage. But all of the trains, you know, in many cases I had a car all to myself. So they're not they don't seem to be as utilized as you would expect. It looks like a lot of people are now getting into cars and driving cars.
Now you say immigrants. Now what do you mean by who's emigrated into Germany?
Well, as you know, most of the people that were displaced in Syria and you know and the Middle East are clamoring to get into Germany. Germany accepted over 800,000 people last year. Contrary to, I think, at best, what we've done in the U.S. is about 60,000. Okay, though in reality, you know, in a way, we stirred the mess in the Middle East.
Yeah, well.
Okay, so, you know, in
Iraq,
terms of responsibility.
4 million displaced Iraqis, they went somewhere. They went to Syria and Jordan.
Yeah.
And that's where the next blow up was, in Syria.
Yeah, so, you know, as far as transport, there's a lot of local transport, trolleys everywhere. Most towns have it. There's only one town that has eliminated trolleys, and people were very upset. And that's in Poland. All other places have trolleys, and trolleys are less than $1 to go for, like, they have various flavors of tickets. But if you're, like, my uncle told me that if you're over, I think if you're over 65, then the transport, local transport is free.
Nice.
As long as you stay within a certain area.
Okay. So now the trolleys, do they have tracks? Are they?
Oh yeah.
Trolleys
are
they electrified?
Yeah, they're like electric trains, except that move on streets in the cities.
And
They also have trolley buses, which have no track. They're still connected to the grid, but they're on rubber wheels.
Okay. So you can still drive around and then you don't go the bumpity bump over the trolley tracks when they pass over them.
Well, most of the roads are still, quite old. They're not smooth pavement. They are, the stone,
The
round
cobblestones
stone.
rather than asphalt.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in a city, that doesn't make any difference because you're not going to go over 25 miles an hour in a city anyway.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. But the traffic in most cities, is quite low. Although in Dresden we did see people clamoring to get out, and because of the traffic lights, it was quite a long way to get out.
Okay. Quick heads up. We're going to come back tomorrow and do another show that we're going to take Henrry will take us from Germany to the Czech Republic and to Poland, which is the country that Henrry actually came from. Where in Poland did you come from?
Well, I was born in a region that most of you know called Silesia, and that's the coal country. Mm-hmm. It's in southern Poland. And there are many, many towns in that area, at least 10 towns with a population of at least 150,000 people.
That's sounds very romantic. But we're going to continue the discussion. It's been Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson. Henrry Pietras is going to continue talking, and then we'll see you tomorrow at noon 30 and continue that discussion. So continue. Take us for the last minute. Just to stay with Germany, in my train ride I observed a lot of solar power. Mm-hmm. I mean, anytime I saw a solar farm, I took a picture. I mean, I don't know if it came out because the train's moving fast, so it got blurry. So that's why you took 10,000 pictures, huh?
I took 10,000 pictures. Yeah, a lot of them are blurry, so I'll throw out the blurry ones. But a lot of windmills. I also saw it from the air when we went from Dortmund back to Warsaw. I saw a lot of energy or solar energy being implemented all over.
Now, when you say windmills, do you mean those little inky-dinky things that we used to see in the movies about Holland?
No. It's more like what you see in Texas and
been there, West Texas. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Have a great day, great evening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.